The restaurant was elegant, humming with soft jazz and the quiet clinking of glasses. Warm lighting danced off crystal chandeliers. Guests were dressed in their finest. Laughter flowed easily from the tables around them. It was the kind of place people went to celebrate something special. Tonight, Julian and Naomi were celebrating their 9th wedding anniversary. Naomi wore a deep blue satin dress. Her makeup was soft, her smile gentle but forced. She had spent days planning this dinner, called the guests, reserved the private dining room, even picked out Julian's favorite wine. Julian was quiet most of the evening, his smile tight, his eyes elsewhere. Still, Naomi stayed hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, tonight would be different. Then, Julian stood up. He held his wine glass, tapping it lightly for attention. The room grew quiet as everyone turned to face him. Naomi looked up, smiling, expecting something sweet, a toast to their years together, to their love. But Julian's voice was cold. To the woman who can't give me a son. He paused, looking around the table, but gives great excuses. Laughter died instantly. The silence was sharp. Naomi blinked. Her smile froze, then fell. Her hands trembled under the table. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Julian sat down calmly, sipped his wine as if he hadn't just torn her apart in front of everyone. Naomi stood, her chair screeching against the floor. Her heels clicked loudly as she walked out, fast, trying to hold back the tears that were already spilling. The door shut behind her. Julian didn't follow. He stayed seated, leaning back, looking satisfied. The room buzzed with discomfort, but no one spoke. Then his phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. He frowned, hesitating. Finally, he picked up. "Hello?" he said, low. A woman's voice answered, shaky, urgent. "You need to come now," she said. "The baby's sick. Julian, your son is in the hospital." His body stiffened. "What?" he whispered. "You heard me," the voice said. "Your son, our son, he needs you." His hand shook. The phone slipped slightly in his grip. The color drained from his face. In an instant, the arrogance disappeared. Julian's heart pounded. For the first time all night, he looked afraid. Julian was 42. On paper, he had it all. A powerful lawyer in Atlanta, known for his sharp mind and even sharper tongue. He wore expensive suits, drove a black Mercedes, and walked with the kind of confidence that came from winning, in court and in life. But underneath all that success was a man ruled by pride and tradition. He grew up in a strict Nigerian home where men didn't cry, and women were expected to bear children, especially sons. His father had drilled it into him from a young age. A man's worth is measured by his legacy, and legacy, in their world, meant bloodline, a male heir, a first son to carry the name forward. Naomi was 37, strong in her own way, smart, elegant, and successful in her own career as a marketing executive. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and made people pause. But behind her poise was a deep, quiet sadness. They had been married 9 years. In that time, Naomi had gotten pregnant 3 times, and each time, she had lost the baby. The pain of each miscarriage cut deep. But what hurt even more was the way Julian handled it, or didn't. He would disappear for days, blaming work. When he did speak, it was cold and distant. He never held her when she cried, never said, "We'll get through this together." Instead, he buried himself in silence and blame. To make things worse, Julian's mother never missed a chance to remind Naomi that she was failing. "A woman's job is to give her husband children," she would say, sometimes right in front of Julian, and he never once defended Naomi. He just stood there looking at the floor. Still, Naomi stayed. She stood beside Julian when a client accused him of fraud, even when his law firm nearly dropped him. She smiled at dinner parties. She wore the mask, but the cracks were growing. Now, Naomi was seeing a therapist, secretly, every Thursday at 3 p.m. She never told Julian because she knew he'd mock it. "Therapy is for weak people," he had once said. So she kept it to herself, just like she kept the letter in her purse. The letter was never meant to be read. Not really. It was something she wrote on a night when she couldn't sleep. A letter full of truth, raw and honest. She told him everything she had held in for years. The loneliness, the pain, how she sometimes wished she had left him after the second miscarriage. She kept the letter folded neatly in her bag, tucked in the side pocket. Sometimes she'd reach for it, thinking maybe today would be the day she'd hand it to him, but she never did. Julian, on the other hand, had his own secret. For the past few weeks he had been getting calls from an unknown number. At first he ignored them, then came the texts. Short, sharp. You can't hide forever. He looks just like you. He deleted them. He never mentioned anything to Naomi. During dinner, when his phone buzzed, he would slide it into his pocket. When he stepped away to take a call, Naomi would glance at the screen, wondering, but she never asked. She was too tired to fight over things she didn't have answers to. Their marriage had become a quiet war. No yelling, no slamming doors, just silence, long stares, and unspoken things buried under the floorboards. In public, they looked like the perfect couple, but behind closed doors, they lived like strangers. Two people bound together by memories, broken dreams, and the ghost of the family they never had. Naomi still hoped. A small, flickering hope, but she also knew she was reaching her limit. Something had to give. And Julian was about to find out that secrets don't stay buried forever. Julian stepped outside the restaurant, the cold night air hitting his face. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The same unknown number again. It had been calling for days. He had ignored it before, but something about tonight made him answer. "Hello?" he said. There was silence at first. Then a woman's voice came through, shaky but sharp. "If you don't come clean now, I will." Julian's heart skipped. He didn't say a word. "The baby is sick, Julian," she continued. "He's your son, and he needs you." His body froze. For a few seconds he couldn't breathe. His mind went blank. "What?" he whispered, barely able to speak. "You heard me," the voice said. "He's your son. You've ignored me for months, but I can't protect you anymore. I'm at the hospital. I'll give you an hour before I tell the whole world." The line went dead. Julian stood there, stunned. His hand trembled, and he dropped the phone. It clattered onto the pavement. He didn't pick it up right away. His face was pale. The noise of the restaurant behind him felt distant now, like it was part of another world. He leaned against the wall, trying to breathe, but his chest was tight. He thought back. A year ago, Naomi had just lost her third pregnancy. She had locked herself in their bedroom for days. She cried at night, trying not to let him hear, but he did. Instead of holding her, Julian stayed out late. One night, too drunk and too angry, he crossed a line. His assistant, Lena, had been staying late at the office. She was kind, she listened, and when he kissed her, she didn't stop him. It only happened once. At least, that's what he told himself. A week later, Lena quit without warning. No goodbye, no notice. He figured she was ashamed, or maybe smart enough to run. Either way, she was gone, and Julian never looked for her until now. Now she was calling him, saying the baby was his, saying the child was sick. Julian suddenly felt like he was falling. He looked through the restaurant window. He saw the empty chair where Naomi had been sitting. The tablecloth still had her lipstick stain on the wine glass. But she was gone. She had run out after the toast. The cruel words he had thrown at her like knives. He had thought he was being clever, making a point. But now, standing in the dark, he realized what a fool he'd been. He rushed inside. People stared. Someone asked if he was okay. He didn't answer. He ran to the table. Naomi's purse was gone. So was her coat. He looked around, but she wasn't there. He pulled out his phone again, dialing her number. No answer. Again. Still no answer. He felt panic rising. A tight, heavy panic that sat in his chest like a stone. He had destroyed her with words, humiliated her in front of everyone, and now she was gone. And somewhere out there, a baby he had never met, his own son, was lying in a hospital bed, sick, maybe dying. Julian didn't know what to do. His whole world had cracked open in a matter of minutes. And for the first time in a very long time, he was scared, not of losing his reputation, not of being found out. He was scared of what he had already lost. Julian spent the next day trying to reach Naomi. He called her over and over again, but she didn't pick up. He texted. Nothing. He even drove home that night, thinking maybe she had returned, but the house was dark. Her clothes were gone, her toothbrush. Her favourite coffee mug wasn't on the counter. She was gone. He sat on the couch and called her again, straight to voicemail. He tried calling her best friend, Angela. At first she refused to answer, but finally she picked up. "She's safe," Angela said coldly. "Where is she?" Julian asked. "That's not your concern anymore," she said. "You humiliated her in front of everyone. She needed a place to breathe. She's at a hotel, and no, I won't tell you which one. Leave her alone." Julian's hands tightened around the phone. "I just want to talk to her." "She doesn't want to talk to you," Angela snapped and hung up. Julian threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and fell to the floor. The next few days were chaos. He couldn't concentrate at work. He showed up late, snapped at his paralegal, messed up a hearing date. His boss noticed. "You good, Julian?" he asked. Julian nodded, but didn't speak. Every day he called Naomi. Every night he checked the house, hoping she'd come back. The silence inside was loud. Her absence filled every corner. Meanwhile, Naomi sat quietly in a hotel room across town. The room was small, simple, clean, a neutral space where she could finally think. She spent hours staring out the window, the city lights blinking in the distance. She didn't cry, not anymore. She thought back to the early days, when Julian had still held her hand in public, when he used to kiss her forehead and call her his queen, before the miscarriages, before his mother started calling every week, asking about baby news, before Julian began pulling away. She remembered how he'd changed the subject every time she brought up trying again, how he'd avoid her eyes during doctor visits, how he'd started working later, coming home smelling like a stranger. There had been one weekend, nearly a year ago, that stood out. Naomi had just lost their third baby. She was in bed, bleeding and weak. Julian had stayed out late 2 nights in a row. He said he had a case to prepare, a big one, but something had felt off. She remembered the smell of perfume on his shirt, not hers, someone else's. That was the same weekend Lena had quit. No goodbye, just gone. Naomi closed her eyes. A cold feeling settled over her, a piece of the puzzle clicking into place. Then, 3 days after the restaurant incident, Naomi heard a knock at her hotel room door. She opened it cautiously. No one was there, but on the floor sat a brown envelope. No name, no return address. She took it inside, heart pounding. Inside was a stack of papers. The first was a birth certificate. Father, Julian Adderwell. Mother, Lena Brooks. Child, Micah Julian Brooks. Born 7 months ago. Naomi sat down slowly. Next came medical record, hospital forms, notes from a pediatrician. The baby had a heart condition. Nothing fatal, but serious enough. And then, a photo. A little boy, curled up in a hospital crib. Dark brown skin, round cheeks, eyes that looked just like Julian's. She stared at the photo for a long time. Everything inside her went quiet. No shock, no tears, just stillness. It all made sense now. The calls, the way Julian had looked after answering his phone that night. Pale, shaken. She wasn't surprised. Not really. She was angry, but not the kind of anger that explodes. This was different. A steady, calm fire that burned from the inside out. Julian hadn't just betrayed her. He had humiliated her for something she couldn't control, while hiding a son he'd made with another woman. She looked at the picture again. The child was innocent. It wasn't his fault. But Julian, he had made his choice. He had walked away from his wife, his vows, and the truth. Naomi folded the papers neatly and put them back in the envelope. She placed it on the nightstand. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, still and cold and ready. She was done feeling sorry for herself, done waiting for him to be the man she married. Now, it was her turn to act. Julian was in his office, staring at a blank screen. He hadn't done any real work in days. His mind was full, spinning, restless. Every time his phone buzzed, he hoped it was Naomi. It never was. Then came a soft knock on the door. "Come in," he said, not looking up. The door opened slowly. He looked up and froze. Naomi. She stepped inside without a word, closed the door behind her, and walked over to his desk. She looked calm, too calm. Before he could speak, she placed a large brown envelope on the desk. Julian stared at it, then looked at her. "What is this?" he asked, voice low. "Open it," she said. He opened the envelope with shaking hands, pulled out the birth certificate, the hospital records, the photo. His eyes widened. "Naomi, I can explain." She raised her hand, stopping him. "Don't," she said. "Don't lie to me again." Julian stood up. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't even know if the child was mine at first." Naomi shook her head. "You humiliated me for not giving you a son, while you abandoned your actual son." Julian's mouth opened, but no words came out. "You stood up in front of our family and friends," she continued, "and made a joke out of my pain, my losses. And all the while, you knew you had a child out there." He stepped around the desk. "Naomi, I swear, I didn't know he was sick." She cut him off again. "I know Lena didn't send me those documents." Julian froze. "What?" "I hired a private investigator, weeks ago. After I saw how nervous you got every time your phone rang. After I saw how different you became." He stared at her, stunned. "I've known for a while now," she said. "I wanted to see how far you would go. If you'd ever tell me. If you'd ever show me a shred of honesty." Julian sat back down, defeated. He looked smaller now, quieter. Naomi reached into her bag and pulled out one more envelope. She placed it on the desk. "This one's from me," she said. He picked it up, slowly opened it. Divorce papers. His eyes scanned the words, but they didn't make sense at first. His hands trembled. "Naomi, please." "No," she said softly. "I'm not doing this out of anger. I'm doing it because I finally remembered my worth." He looked up at her, eyes full of something close to regret. "But we can fix this. I can be better. You always wanted a legacy," she said, cutting through his words like glass. "Let this be it. A man who destroyed everything because he couldn't love." She turned and walked to the door, paused. "You have a son now. Don't fail him the way you failed me." Then she left. Julian sat alone, the papers in his hands, the silence louder than any argument. Months had passed. Naomi now lived in a quiet apartment not far from downtown. It wasn't big, but it was hers. It smelled like lavender and coffee. The walls were lined with books and soft light. Peace lived there with her. She had found something new, not just freedom, but purpose. Every Saturday morning, Naomi met with a group of women at a small community center. Some were newly separated. Some still lived with partners who didn't see their worth. Naomi sat with them, listened to their stories, and gently shared her own. Not in full detail, but just enough to let them know they weren't alone. She wasn't the same woman who had sat silently at fancy dinners, afraid to speak her truth. She laughed now. Real laughter. She wore colors again. She stood taller. One of the women in the group told her, "You don't just talk like someone who survived, you talk like someone who came alive." Naomi smiled. She finally felt like she had. Across the city, Julian's world had shrunk. He visited his son, Micah, often. The boy had a weak heart and was in and out of hospitals, sometimes stable, sometimes not. Julian would sit by his crib, reading picture books, whispering stories, trying to make up for the time he had lost. Lena allowed him to visit, but that was all. She didn't want him in her life. "You weren't there when I needed you," she had said. "Now I'm here for our son, but not for you." At work, things had changed. Colleagues whispered behind his back. Clients pulled their cases. His name, once sharp and respected, now carried a shadow. No one said it out loud, but the gossip about the divorce and the secret child had spread. His confidence cracked. His charm no longer worked. He still had money. He still had the house. But it was quiet now, too quiet, and nothing inside felt like home. One night, Julian walked into the same restaurant where he had once stood and humiliated his wife, the same place where he'd made a cruel toast with a smile on his face. He asked for a table alone. The waiter placed him near the window. He sat in silence, watching people laugh around him. Then across the room, he saw a young couple. The man raised his glass. The woman laughed, covering her mouth like Naomi used to. Julian looked away. No one toasted him that night. No one even noticed him. He sat alone, the wine untouched. The world had moved on, and so had she. Julian found the letter in his mailbox late one evening. There was no return address, but he knew the handwriting. He carried it inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and slowly opened it. It was short, just a few lines, written in Naomi's careful, steady script. "I forgive you, not for you, but for me. I deserve peace. I deserved love. You taught me everything I never want again. I hope your son teaches you everything you never knew how to be." He read it once, then again. His hands trembled slightly. There were no threats, no anger, just truth, quiet and heavy. He didn't cry, but something inside him cracked a little more. He folded the letter slowly, carefully, like it was something sacred. He stood up, walked to the closet, and slipped the letter into his jacket pocket. Then he walked outside into the night. The street was quiet. The city lights blinked in the distance. A soft breeze moved through the trees. Julian stood still for a moment, looking up at the sky. No one was around. No one was waiting for him. He put his hands in his pockets and began to walk, alone. Hi besties, thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe. Bye.